All right, I hope you're ready. In this lesson, we're going to set up an entire WordPress application on our WordPress hosting platform. So now that we have our foundation, we can go ahead and create our first site. This involves a few steps: creating our nginx, our web server config file for this site. The first time we do this is only the very first site you set up. We'll actually remove the default nginx vhost. There's already sort of like that default welcome to nginx site, and we'll get rid of that. We'll create the vhost pool configuration file. That is for our interpreter. Our pool needs a configuration just for this site. We're going to run each site in a separate pool for security and resource management reasons. We're going to create a log file, very simple, and a database and database user for our WordPress site, and then we'll just install the WordPress application. Sounds like a lot, but it's actually going to be very quick because of all the work we've done so far. So let's go ahead and get started and create that nginx vhost configuration file. Okay, so we're logged in on our web server. Let's go ahead and edit that file. Just for the rest of this video, wherever you see yoursitename.conf, you'll need to put your actual website name. So if your website is going to be somewhere like www.tutoriallinux.com, the site name would be Tutorial Linux. And you would use that in your configuration files and your socket files, that sort of thing. So your site name, just pick a site name right now, reduce it so that it doesn't have a dot, it shouldn't be a fully qualified domain name. So leave the www out and leave the .com out, so it should just be your website name. And use that wherever you see your site name. For this example, I'm actually going to use tests.tutoriallinux because my test site is going to be hosted at test.tutoriallinux.com. So test.tutoriallinux.conf is going to be my configuration file. Go ahead and paste the configuration file code in there, and we'll make the necessary changes to customize it for our website name. Okay, so it's actually convenient. We're starting at the bottom where you can see a server block that I use as a redirect. By default, you'll probably want this unless you're doing a subdomain. What this block does is perform a redirect, taking the naked server name, that is yoursite.com, and performing a redirect to the www version of that name. So this is simply adding www to the beginning. And then our other server block, our main server block, is going to actually just treat this. So this is a neat way of redirecting traffic over to your canonical domain name, your www.yoursite.com. That's what you'll have there. So for our example, again, I actually don't need this because I already have a subdomain. It's only going to be accessed with test.tutoriallinux.com. So I don't need this, but if you have something like tutoriallinux.com, you would enter that here. And then this would say, whenever someone comes just looking for tutoriallinux.com, fine, we accept that traffic, but we redirect them over to www.tutoriallinux.com. And then we treat that in our main server block. So for myself, I'm actually going to delete this. I'm using Alt-A to select all of this and Control-K to kill that text. I'm going to use Control-O to write this file, and we'll keep scrolling up. So go to the top of your file, and you'll have your main server block here. So this is the server block that actually listens for this nicely normalized version of your domain name. So for us, this will be test.tutoriallinux.com. For you, this might be www.yoursite.com. Now, you're going to have a username on your web server which contains our HTML or website files, our PHP files. Most hosting companies call this this directory that contains the site files public HTML, so that's just the tradition we'll continue using here. So you'll actually create a system user as well. So you'll have a website name and then a website user. So for us, this will be simply Tutorial Linux. Again, this would be website name, probably the same thing for you. So home Tutorial Linux public HTML. And then this location block simply tries the files, look for PHP files in there. If you find a file name that ends with .php. So if someone's looking for a .php file, as we mentioned earlier, nginx doesn't really know how to handle that. It only knows HTML. So we're going to pass those over to our PHP server. There's caching configuration stuff already in here. We'll cover it later. So these are our caching rules. Don't worry about this. Don't worry about all this caching stuff. More caching stuff. And here's our general fast CGI handling. So we've got a PHP file, and what we're saying is pass it over to fast CGI, that is the fast CGI process manager, FPM, and use this socket. So we've got your site name.sock. So this will be tutoriallinux.sock. Does that make sense? We've got var run php fpm tutoriallinux.sock. This is the socket which we're telling nginx to use for communicating with php fpm. Now on the php fpm side, we'll also have a configuration file that says, hey, for this website, look at this socket for your communication with nginx. The socket has to be configured from both sides. Obviously, both processes need to know where to look to communicate with the other one. So that's pretty much the only important parts of this that we need to look at right now. There's a lot of extra caching rules here, and that's to speed up your site, and we'll talk about those in the professional grade module that's coming up. But don't let it confuse you for now, all this extra caching stuff. It's really just about the fast CGI pass, and the Unix is essentially a Unix socket. So it's saying, hey, it's a Unix socket file, not a TCP socket file, at var run php fpm tutoriallinux.sock. This location block down here, which is for files ending with JS, CSS, PNG, so image files and static files, we're just going to add an extra header to that so that browsers can handle them a little bit more cleverly and aren't constantly re-downloading the same files from our server that they already have cached. So we're setting an expiry date of 30 days. We're telling browsers, hey, please cache these types of files for 30 days. So that's pretty much it. You can go ahead and save this. Again, Control X to get out of here. It'll ask you to save. We're saving test tutoriallinux.conf. And that's it for our nginx config.